All right, we'll now move on to our state preview. So in each of our episodes, Tavis will be taking a close look at some important swing states and how he sees them playing out. So I understand you have a couple of states for us here. Let me just bring up the first one. First one being Ohio. So what do you see happening here?
Right here, and I'll say this: Joe Biden he's hung on here longer than I thought he would, and the Trump campaign he's hung on here so well that the Trump campaign really doesn't have enough money, as much money as they would like nationally, but not enough money as they would like to compete in Ohio. What they're banking on here is strictly demographics and Republicans coming home. I do think you're starting to see that. I think as the race tightens, Ohio will eventually go over the horizon away from Joe Biden. I'd be maybe in a national election in which he wins by 9 or 10, he could win Ohio. I really don't foresee that happening. And you're getting about 1.5. You could get Ohio for about 1.7 if you want to back the Republicans here. I think that represents tremendous value for your money. I think that's really a steal, and I think you almost have to take them at that price, even a little lower. Of all states that stand out to me for bargain prices, I think that's an absolute steal. I really do. Even in a 10-point national win for Joe Biden, it's no guarantee he wins Ohio. So I would look at that to back the Republicans.
Okay. And the second state you're previewing here is your home state of Pennsylvania, or Joe Biden's home state as well.
Joe Biden's home state. I do live on the other side of the river, Pete, New Jersey. I am Jersey born and bred.
Apologies.
Yeah. That's okay. No offense taken.
Yeah, sorry. I always get mixed up with Philadelphia. You're actually on the other side of the border.
Just on the other side of the river, my friend. But that's okay. It is my home city nonetheless, and I'll certainly lay claim to that. Take pride in that. So it is Joe Biden's home, not his home state, but his home media market, where he's spent virtually his entire career in his lifetime in not only the state of Pennsylvania, but the Philadelphia suburbs as well. So he's born in Scranton. You are going to have that built-in home field advantage for him. And you do now start to see him building a consistent lead. This is why we're going to move Pennsylvania in our map. He's really starting to build a solid, not insurmountable, but really starting to build a comfortable lead in Pennsylvania. And even some polls have him up, reputable polls, good polls have him up by double digits. And I think you're starting to see that. Turnout's high in early voting in Pennsylvania. To back to back Biden here, you're gonna have to lay 1 to 2 on your money. Nevertheless, I think it's a safe investment. I do see Biden putting this one away and going over the horizon to a lead before Election Day. Again, he's banking votes now, so he's already cashing in his lead every day that he holds it. I think 1 to 2 odds in Pennsylvania to back the Democrats for Biden. I think that's a good bet, good value price.
All right, fantastic. And it just looks like the liquidity might have disappeared from this market, but as you can see, there's $220,000 matched. So I have no doubt that if you put up a reasonable bet, it will be matched.
For sure, I can see that in your prices there. Someone obviously sharp better snapped up all the prices just before we went to air, but yeah, fear not. I think you're going to be able to get that for around 1.5, maybe even more, to Democrats to back Joe Biden. So if you can get that anywhere around there, anywhere above 1.5, I'd say snap that up.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're now going to have a look at your Electoral College map. For those of you who aren't across how the map works, we actually covered this on one of our previous episodes. So if you jump on the hub, look up US election Tavis Rendell, you'll be able to come across a previous episode where we've covered this in greater detail. But so what's the current situation you have for us here? I see you've coloured in nicely for us, indicating the red states as the states falling to the Republicans and blue for Democrats there. So out of the swing states, what do you have for us today that you can see that you can share to the viewers?
Yeah, a couple differences I have than other forecasts you'll find out there at the moment. Admittedly, I have a few more toss-ups in there. And I've also two states that I'm going to want to dive into where I differ from others. Three states actually. Again, you heard me talk about Ohio prior to our last pick right there. I do not have that as a toss-up. I still think that leans Republican. I would need to see a little more. I'd need to see a much more consistent polling lead for Biden, just because I tend to weight historical precedent and demographics a little more than polls. Some people value polls more. I just don't. And for that reason, you'll also see Florida. I don't have that as lean Biden yet. I know he does have a polling lead there, but again, for just built-in historical advantage where Republicans have wired the state for voter turnout, I would need to see a little more of a polling edge for Biden there. You are seeing one. I would need to see more. I'm going to keep Florida as a toss-up. Final point where I differ from others, Arizona. Same as Florida. I'm in a more of a position where I need to believe it when I see it. There are plenty of polls out there that show this a 3-point race for Joe Biden. To me, that's still a toss-up. I know demographics and voter shift, you are seeing a gain by Democrats every 2 years. You consistently see it across the map in Arizona, but not a comfortable enough lead for me to put that in the lean blue column. For that reason, you're going to see overall, I just have Joe Biden at 279. I haven't won him by one state. Okay, that's not much. And in one respect, that could sound crazy for a candidate with a 7, 8, 9 point, over an 8-point national lead on average. But it just shows you in the swing states that national lead is not translating into a comfortable lead in battleground states. It's a lead, not a comfortable one. And so this is really on a knife edge in a way. It's at 279. We just take a 3-point national shift before you see that yellow start to creep into our electoral map here, enough to put him back down over 270 and create a much more competitive race. If the election were held today, I do think Biden would win. Election day is 3 weeks away, and while he is banking votes, I think this is a little more competitive than other people do.
Yep, sure. So I guess if the Trump campaign gathers more momentum, and each of the yellow states then fall to the Republicans, then you're at 279 point for Biden, and I guess you're only looking at one surprise state to flip towards the Republicans, such as Wisconsin. Then all of a sudden Donald Trump is re-elected.
Right. That's why I fear, and as many other political analysts, not just election forecasters, get into, is it really could only take chaos in mail-in voting in one state. And this is an atypical election because so many votes are being cast by mail. Trump continues to cast aspersions on voter fraud, rigged mail-in balloting on Twitter, which he's got a disturbingly large percentage of the population believing. In one of these states, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, I do think Biden's building a comfortable lead there, and I think that's his fastest route back to the White House is to restore that blue wall. Those 3 northeastern, midwestern states that Hillary Clinton lost, flip them back to his column. But it only needs mail-in or voting chaos in one of those 3 states, and we're back to electoral chaos. So, yeah, I think that's where, if he's able to flip one of those states back, yeah, he could. And again, he'd have to win all these toss-ups that we have in yellow, but it's not that hard a scenario to imagine happening.
Okay. We're now going to move on to the viewer questions, and a big thanks to everyone for sending these in. We absolutely love receiving them, love being able to answer these questions for you. So the first one is from Chris. He mentions Trump has started the week with posting some aggressive tweets directed at New York and California, claiming they're going to hell, vote Trump. What is his play here, and what is he hoping to achieve by this?
Right, that's typical of his personality. What is he trying to achieve? Pure political polarization. He's trying to ramp up his base. When you're bashing California, that's code for bashing liberalism or liberal states, bashing of blue states. In reality, California is actually one of the most successful states in the country. It's got one of the highest per capita incomes in the country. So, and in normal times, the mere notion of an American president bashing one of the 50 states before an election would be unthinkable. Just one of the many things that are unthinkable in this era. Nevertheless, you're going to continue to see more of that. That's pure turn out the base, bash California, bash Hollywood. Typical tactics for Trump, just getting his base excited.
Okay, excellent. Next is a question from Jim. We saw the silent majority make their voice heard after Hillary was the heavy favourite 4 years ago. It seems like Biden is heavy favourite again. How is the silent majority being priced in this election?
That's a good question. Being priced in by pollsters, I'll take that. Unless he means betting exchanges, but I think he means pollsters. So it's being priced in two very important ways. What we saw in 2016 again has been chewed upon and studied for 4 years now, was a polling miss in key states. The polls were not off by that much nationally, but they certainly were off in those key Midwestern states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and even Minnesota was pretty close. Hillary only won that by a little over a point. So all those Midwestern states, polls were way off, which led to the most shocking political development upset of my lifetime. Okay. What they've done to correct that is weight their polls by education, try to include more of a sampling of white voters without a college degree in their polls to capture that Trump base. They've done as best they can with that. And a second important way in which they've tried to correct themselves from 2016 and price in that silent majority, that Trump base, is by getting more of a geographical representation. They're not just doing random, when they're doing live caller interviews, they're not just doing random phone number dialing. They're targeting those phone numbers toward geographic areas of those states to try to incorporate more rural voters. And they're trying to include a better geographic sampling of every battleground state that they poll. So you want to make sure you capture that rural voters. And they're doing that by factoring in population density. What do we know from the current state of American politics? Is population density is one of the biggest forecasters of the way someone is going to vote. The more dense the population is, New York City or LA, for example, the more dense the population is, the more likely you are to vote Democratic. So they're making those calls and trying to disperse those calls in larger areas, or a more fair sampling of population density throughout a state. Hopefully I answered that in much a targeted way for Jim as we could.
That's a great response.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And the last question we have is from Steve. There has been a lot of talk about voters who elected Trump 4 years ago and are now abandoning him for Biden. Under what circumstances do you see voters going the other way? For example, those that didn't vote for Trump 4 years ago now jumping on board.
So that's one of the key unknowns that's been discussed for 4 years. You always hear about that Obama-Trump voter, and Democrats have long sought to bring them back into the fold. Trump voters in 2016 to flip them back into the column for Joe Biden. And there are people, Trump has, it has not been glaring, but he has lost that 2 to 3 point edge off of his base. Many of them are senior citizens affected by COVID. That's been a huge variable in this race. But you are seeing that small shift of Trump voters peeling away from him. The $1 million question is, on the other side, what's the other side of that coin, right? Are there going to be any Hillary Clinton to Trump voters? You never hear about that. And I've always wondered, has this guy won any converts over the past 4 years? My guess is no, but that doesn't mean he can't find a way to make up his deficit and win. The way to do that for him would be to double down, triple down even more on his base of white voters without a college degree. Contrary to popular belief, there are more of them out there. That can be done. And they do live in that northern tier, that blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. We have extremely low vote. One thing I want to emphasize to your international observers is people don't really vote in the United States, especially young people. We have a terrible voter turnout in this country. And there are a ton of unregistered, probably near 1 million if you aggregate all these states together, of unregistered voters, of white voters without a college degree that simply just tune out. They don't vote. So if the Trump campaign will look to make up that deficit, not by winning converts, just by ramping up their registration efforts, which they could do with those type of voters. And they could just register more of them, and it could be first-time voters that are inactive. They're just not interested in politics. They don't vote. But if they could get them to vote, yeah, that's one way he could make up his deficit. So that's what I would forecast for that, a way he could do that.
Yeah, and I guess another thing to consider there is that there was a portion of voters that voted for the independent 4 years ago. It doesn't appear as though there's that they'll receive the same percentage of votes towards an independent this time around. So I guess that's potentially an area where Trump can make up ground as well.
For sure. I'm glad you brought that up, Pete, because that is one of the biggest differences. It's where candidates could both make up ground. Actually, you'll see the common refrain you'll hear is, "Well, Hillary had a great lead in 2016, and the polls were wrong." Well, yeah, Hillary had a lead, but you'll often see a lot of those. If you recall, a lot of those polls were maybe they were 46 to 42 or 48 to 44. Well, none of that adds up to 100. You get a lot of undecideds, a lot of third-party vote in there. The difference now, you'll see in these polls, you'll see Biden crack the magic number of 50 in a lot of these polls, 52, 53, 50, 54. That is more of a blinking red light warning sign for Trump because he doesn't have that third-party vote to siphon away votes from Joe Biden. Remember we talked about Kanye? Kanye had got a lot of press 2 or 3 months ago when he announced to run for president. Well, Kanye didn't make the ballot. Kanye West didn't make the ballot in a lot of critical states. A couple, but not enough to really be a force. So there's no drain for either candidate. There's not a real libertarian drain for Republicans. There's not much of a Green Party drain on the left wing for Democrats. So it's more of a two-horse race now. You're not going to see a lot of that diluted effect. That's why you're starting to see Joe Biden crack 50% in a lot of these polls.
Yep, fantastic. All right, so we're going to wrap things up. That's all that we have time for with this episode. Just a reminder to keep sending in your viewer questions. You can do so by sending Tavis or I a direct message on Twitter. Also, if you're new to Betfair and would like to open an account, then please reach out to me, pete.jones@betfair.com.au, and I'll be more than happy to help you out. Tavis, thanks very much for all of your insights once again. It's a pleasure to have you part of this series, and I look forward to hearing from you again in a couple of weeks with our final episode.
Absolutely, Pete. Yeah, thank you as well for being great to be back with you this week. And thanks to all the listeners out there for watching. We really appreciate you guys. Thanks for interacting with us on Twitter. Get your questions in now. So one more episode we'll try to do, in addition to a couple articles. But we'll do one more episode for you guys in the probably the final 96 hours before Election Day on the weekend before. So we'll try to get that out there and give you our final forecast.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks for being part of this once again, and look forward to catching
you too, brother. Take care. Talk to you soon.